Hello, so welcome to another reading vlog. This week I'm going to be continuing and trying to finish Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. In my last reading vlog I got about halfway through, just shy of halfway through according to my Kobo, and it's saying that I have about 18 hours of reading left, which if I want to read this in a week means like between 2 and 3 hours a day. Is that realistic? Possibly not, but I guess we'll see. So this, if you don't know, but you should know, is the fourth book in the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson, the fifth and final book in the particular arc. So the Stormlight Archives is going to be 10 books, but the fifth book supposedly wraps a lot of things up, and then the next 5 books are kind of going to be later or something. Anyway, the fifth book is coming out in December, so I've been doing a big Cosmere reread like the last 2 years to prepare myself to read this book and also The Lost Metal, and then be ready for Wind and Truth. And to be honest, this one started out a little bit boring, however, has just kind of amped up at the end of part 2 and going into part 3. I'm a lot more excited about what's happening. Oh, this book's always too big to hold. And usually Brandon Sanderson is really good at endings, so I'm hoping the second half of this is going to be very exciting. That's what I'm hoping for. And then that will help with getting through it because I'll be motivated. Also, of course, I need some audiobooks on the go. So I'm also halfway through Sweep of the Heart by Ilona Andrews, which is, again, the final book in a series. Am I pretending like this is the final book in a series? I guess this is the last book that's been released in a series, which maybe is the same for Sweep of the Heart, the fifth book in the Innkeeper Chronicles. I think it's the last book in the series, but it's always possible that it isn't going to wrap everything up. And this world is really cool, so there's kind of potentially infinite stories that could be created in this world. But I think the big things of the main character are going to be wrapped up in this story. So basically this is like a sci-fi fantasy where all the supernatural creatures of the world are actually aliens, and Earth happens to be a bit of a transportation hub, and whenever aliens are passing through, they treat it as a bit of a way station, and they stay in these inns where the innkeepers' jobs are basically to keep aliens a secret from humans, but also to protect the aliens from other aliens, mostly because there's a lot of bigger politics going on in the world. So as I said, Sweep of the Heart, I was kind of hoping this was going to be a big epic final conclusion, and there are some epic things going on. However, kind of from about a quarter of the way through to where I am now, just past halfway, has been kind of an intergalactic bachelor type competition. There's a bunch of people competing in this thing that is being televised and is very similar to the Bachelor TV show, where all these different races have put forward candidates to marry this very important leader. And the innkeeper that we're following, the big story is that she's trying to find out what happened to her parents that went missing. And so in some ways this feels like a bit of a sidetrack, bit of a distraction, but she's hoping by doing this that she'll get some information, actually not to track down her parents, to track down someone else. But I'm hoping that she'll also find out something about her parents as part of the same thing. Anyway, I really love Ilona Andrews' writing, the way they do action and world building and character development and just the whole thing. I have a lot of fun. Maybe this isn't going in the direction I thought it would, but we'll see how the second half goes. As well, this is maybe slightly ambitious, but I would also like to read the last 2 books in the Murderbot series by Martha Wells. Not physically, because I don't have time to read this and these physically, but even though I have been reading most of the Murderbot diaries physically, and I kind of would prefer to, but in the second half of the month I've kind of planned to pick up some new series, and to make myself feel better about that, I would like to finish some series off so that I don't ruin my whole goal of getting to series 0 too much. So I think I'm going to try the audiobooks for these, and we'll see. If I really don't like them, then I'll go back to reading these physically, probably at a later date. I did get them both physically from the library, but I also have the audiobooks from the library, so we'll see. I have heard the audiobooks are really good, so fingers crossed. And probably you've heard about the Murderbot books, but otherwise I will talk about them when I get to them, if I get to them. Hopefully I'll get to them.
Chasing one another, getting lost in another summer. Never wanted it to
Hello. So I think that I have been really terrible at this vlog this week because it's already Saturday and I think this might actually only be my second update. Most of that though is because I haven't been doing as much reading as I would have liked to be doing. Again, most of that is because there's been a bunch of nonsense with selling my house. Basically, lawyers and real estate agents don't think it's signed off properly, but the council does, and drama, even though actually after most of the drama it turns out that it's all fine. So just a bunch of stress for no good reason because of bureaucracy and documentation. Also, it's Saturday, so this is a more public spot than I would like, with people walking around all over the place. So I'll probably be editing out lots of big gaps. But anyway, let me update you on the reading that I have done. So I think I'm somewhere near the end of part 3 of Rhythm of War, and I am liking it. I think part of my problem is because I'm reading it at the same time. There's cars driving past, that's probably also noisy. Anyway, because I'm reading it at the same time as the Innkeeper Chronicle books, which are so high action. Yeah, high action, that's the right way to describe it. And also the end of Oathbringer was so high action that now I keep wondering why Rhythm of War doesn't have more action, even though actually I think it's fine that it doesn't have more action. Part 3 is a lot of understanding more about the magic of the world and dealing with some of the consequences that happened at the end of part 2. I am a bit annoyed. There's something that also was happening in part 2, and then we haven't gotten any of those characters. So we kind of have characters in 3 different places, and we've primarily been getting 2 in part 3, but it's actually the other one that I think is the most interesting and I'm most keen to get back to. Although I am enjoying learning more about the magic as well. Oh, and the backstory. I'm especially enjoying the backstory because it's a lot about these different races of people coming together, different cultures, different languages, and how misunderstandings are forming. I like seeing how those misunderstandings that we know from the rest of the story, we know exist. Seeing how those came to be is really interesting. Oh, and now it's windy. Perfect. So I am enjoying part 3. I'm kind of expecting, though, that once again at the end we'll have another escalation. And part 4, normally part 5 is shorter, and part 4 forms kind of the bulk of the end of the story. And then there's just kind of the big climax in part 5. So I'm kind of hoping, we should get back to the other group in part 4. And I really don't know where things are going to end, which is exciting. So probably I'll update you again when I get to the end of part 3. I think I've still got probably quite a few chapters, even though I'm pretending that I'm near the end. The other thing, so I have finished Sweep of the Heart, and what I realized is this is not the end of the series. I actually went and did the research, and I found a thing online saying that Ilona Andrews was saying they would put out the next Innkeeper Chronicles probably at the end of 2025, and they weren't sure because originally most of these books were released in serialized form, and they weren't sure whether this would be done in serialized form or not because they feel like this book, the last book, did they say the last book or did I imagine that again? I'm not sure. But they feel like this book will need a lot of editing, so they're not sure if it's going to suit the serialized format, which I'm kind of fine with. So in the end, Sweep of the Heart kind of ended up being mostly this big bachelor show. And as I said, I had a lot of fun with it. And it actually is really political because it's a political bachelor show. And so I kind of think if you like the bachelor show, or if you've ever enjoyed watching one of those and just the drama of it, and you also like Star Wars, I think you might like it because I feel the politics of it, this big intergalactic empire and all these different races having different ideas of what should be happening, that to me felt very much like Star Wars. I don't know. Anyway, I did have a lot of fun with it. And the ending was very action-packed, intense, emotional, really cool magically. I really love the ending actually, but that was not the book that I thought this was going to be at all. I had a good time, but I'm still conflicted about it because I thought it was going to be a little bit more serious than it was. And while these books always have a humorous element, this was much more humorous than I expected. But I did laugh a lot. So then I've just started the audiobook of Network Effect, and I'll continue it on my run home. I'm not sure how I feel about the audiobook. The tone isn't quite like how I read Murderbot in my head. It's close, but I'm not sure. I always find reading Murderbot books is a good way to analyze your own gender biases, because Murderbot doesn't have a gender, and you always see people referring to Murderbot as he or she, but they do not have a gender. They're a Murderbot. So, like, giving Murderbot a gender is you projecting onto the character, because there is no gender there. But also, of course, for the audiobook, it's a male narration or a more masculine voice. And so that adds, I think, like a bunch of masculine connotations. But I can't tell yet. I've only just started. And I don't know if I'll ever know, like, how much of my different perspective of the story from reading it physically versus the audiobook. How much is the masculine audiobook narrator and how much is just the different narration style? And anything that's changing my perspective based on the fact that it's a masculine audiobook narrator, is that my own perspective of what the masculine gender is like? I don't know. I find it all like just very interesting to think about, but also like I just don't know if I like it. I probably think the audiobook narration is still good, and I probably will continue with it just to see, but I kind of wish I did have time to read it physically instead, so that I could read it with my own interpretation of the tone. But I also think this is a series that I would probably reread in the future if I can ever have time. But I have a longer term reread project that I'd like to do too, because I feel like I don't reread books enough, especially books that I've really loved but read at a time when I was too busy, and so I didn't focus on them as well as I should have. Anyway, I'll listen to more of Network Effect on my run home, and we'll see how I feel about it when I've listened to it a bit more, because I haven't got that far yet. Okay, so I have finally gotten to the end of part 3 of The Rhythm of War, and once again, at the end of the part, things got intense. A lot of things went wrong for our characters. And actually the last line of part 3 is the kind of line that just makes me really sad. Like, not in a crying way, but kind of in a depressing kind of way. But it definitely achieved its goal, I think, of making me feel something. And there was a little bit of a twist, which was somewhat devastating, in terms of like a character really having been doing their best and then discovering that that's not been a great thing that they've been doing. Anyway, I am definitely feeling more and more emotionally engaged in this. And we had a fair amount of action, I guess, at the end of that part as well. Then as well, I did read the interludes, and I think sometimes I just love the interludes more than the actual story. Especially we got one perspective from this like weird little insect pet that one character has. Very enlightening. And the other little interludes were very enlightening as well. I think sometimes we learn the most in those interludes. Look how hard this book is to hold. I always end up losing the dust jacket. Maybe I should just hold the dust jacket. Would that be easier? Maybe. Anyway, I'm making progress on this. I have decided though, since it is now Monday, that I'm just going to accept that it's going to take me the rest of the week to finish this. And when it comes to Wind and Truth, I need to be honest with myself about how long that's going to take, because I don't like to rush these books. It's kind of better if you can take your time with it, although I'm still hoping the ending will get me so excited that I will want to rush it to know what's going to happen. But anyway, I'll continue that. Then as well, I have listened to a bit more of Network Effect. I don't actually know how much. Let me check my phone. Okay, Libby says I'm 27? Numbers are hard. Libby says I'm 27% of the way through this, and I think I've now gotten used to the masculine audiobook narrator, or the audiobook narration, just the different style from what I was expecting. Although I will say, now as I'm reading it, I feel like I'm drawing more comparisons to the Bobaverse books, just because we've got kind of a slightly sarcastic narrator, but I never drew that comparison before until I've gotten this audiobook narrator. So maybe it's just because I read the Bobaverse books as audiobooks as well. Anyway, I'm having a lot of fun with this. At first, I was like, where is this going to go? And then something happened, maybe 20% of the way in, and it kind of linked back to one of the other bot characters that we've met earlier in the series. And the bot characters are really the characters that I love the most in this series. And I'm very excited, although very worried, about what's happening with that bot character. And Murderbot is also very concerned. So it's kind of nice to see Murderbot experiencing emotions, even though they never really want to admit to feeling emotions. But still, I'm only 27% of the way through, so I will be continuing this this week as well. I'll just keep the vlog going though, because I forgot to update most of last week anyway.
We're chasing one another, getting lost in another summer. Never wanted it to end. Now I'm losing all my friends. I'm reminded of the pain when I'm on the interstate, me and the moon, and we think of you. Remember when we sat out in the football field, watched the sunset and succumb to all our favorite feels. But somehow I was sad, 'cause I knew that it would end. And I'll go.
Hello, so it is time for me to give you an update on my thoughts, but I have not really pre-thought about my thoughts, so let's try and gather them. Firstly, I have gotten to the end of part 4. I'm up to part 5 of The Rhythm of War. What I am concerned about is that at the beginning of every part, like, it kind of tells you what characters are going to be involved, and I'm not seeing the names of a lot of characters I would have expected to be in part 5, so now I'm very concerned about what direction part 5 is going in. But I guess we will see. It's already Sunday, and I've been reading this book now for 4 weeks. I usually try to read 1 book a week, and I knew this one was going to take extra long. I put aside 3 weeks. But we're going to be into our 5th week tomorrow, and I doubt I will finish this tonight because we're going to go out in a bit, so I guess that's just what it is. I am still enjoying my reading experience. There was a part at the end of part 4, which I think is what Brandon Sanderson is really great at sometimes, is where you figure something out just before the reveal, and so like you feel good for having solved it, for working it out, for putting it all together, but like because it's revealed just after that, it's not like anything ever feels obvious. You figure it out just in time, and I think that feels very satisfying, and like it's kind of nice to believe that Brandon Sanderson is clever, because then the fact that you worked it out makes you feel like you're clever, or at least that's how I feel. I keep almost dropping this. I will say though, there is a lot of like sciencey, let's call it sciencey, logic-y stuff where one of our characters is trying to like work through things, figure things out, doing scientific experiments. And I feel like some of that would be a lot for some people. And I say this as someone who has studied sound theory. So one part, she's talking about a bunch of sound theory, and I was able to follow it, and I was quite excited about that. However, sometimes the characters take like quite big logical leaps, and I can never tell, like, am I meant to be skeptical that they're actually working things out, or am I meant to be like, oh, that's a logical leap, maybe they've made the wrong logical leap and what they now believe is wrong, and then be worried about that? Or am I meant to, I don't know if you can hear that banging, that's my partner building something. Anyway, I'll keep talking because we got to go out soon, so I need to get this filmed. I just never know. Am I meant to be suspending my disbelief and just going along with some of these logical leaps? And like even the sound theory stuff, I was with it to a certain point, and then it's magic. So it's kind of like, because it's science and magic, I'm like totally following the logic until we get to the magic, and then I'm like, oh well, there is logic to that, but it's not really real life logic. And so I think I'm just struggling with that transition sometimes between reality. There's just almost too much real science in this book. The summary is, I am enjoying this. We're learning a lot. Part 4 was exciting, although I would also say, even though a lot of things have happened in this and we've learnt a lot about the magic in the world, I also feel like the plot of Rhythm of War, like if you compared it to the plot of Words and Radiance, there's almost nothing happening compared to that. And I'm a little bit worried that this is going to be like Oathbringer, where all the plot happens in part 5, and I'm really frustrated with how fast it rushes through it. But I guess we'll see. The other thing is, I did finish off listening to Network Effect. I really enjoyed it. It was such an emotional roller coaster. There were parts where I was like, oh shit, like shit's going down, everything's a disaster. And then like things where everything would come together and I'd be so relieved and excited. And like, in some ways I think that worked really well with the audiobook because I was just out running and able to like feel all these emotions as the story was told to me. And maybe you don't always get that same emotional... I'm disagreeing with myself as I'm saying these words, but I guess sometimes the emotional experience is different between audio and physical books, but I still think I would have enjoyed this if I'd read it physically. But in the end, I ended up enjoying the audiobook a lot as well, so that was good. Yeah, Network Effect was great. I will say I have also read the audiobook of System Collapse because that was a lot shorter. The plot was not as interesting to me. There were still some interesting concepts around the different bots and the way that they're processing their emotions. I love the way that these books look at how bots process emotions and how there's differences compared to humans, but also a lot of similarities that somehow makes it incredibly relatable, even when it is completely different from the human experience. Honestly, I'm having a great time with that series, and I have seen that there are 2 more books planned to be written in that series at least. I'm not sure when we'll get them, but I'm excited that there will be more. I still am struggling to think about how this series is going to be adapted to a TV show because so much of the book is about how Murderbot experiences things differently than humans. Like in System Collapse, there's a bit where they are limited down to just their normal human vision and they're like, well, that's totally crap. But like, how are you really going to show in a TV show that Murderbot is experiencing life through like all these drones and video camera footage and like all the feeds and just different conversations going on at the same time? How is that going to translate to TV? I honestly cannot imagine it. Anyway, as well, I did actually start the audiobook for The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. I haven't got very far into it. Although I realized I confused myself. So when I did the try a chapter for it, oh, now he's drilling. Great. Anyway, when I did the try a chapter for it, I read the first chapter of the girl's perspective and then the first chapter of the guy's perspective. And they're actually there's a big gap in the middle, like where there's quite a bit of the girl's perspective. And because I read those 2 chapters together, I felt like they were going to be more close together. And then I was surprised how long it took to actually get to the guy's perspective. But also, in the try a chapter, I didn't get that much other than this hint of this magical library, but in this first part of this girl's perspective, we got like some very unexpected things happen. There's like these dog type creatures that have come and are having some kind of conflict with the bigger city. So now, like, even though I haven't listened to much of the audiobook, I have a much better sense of what this book is going to be about. And it seems like maybe it's a bit darker than I was expecting. And I'm also thinking that this magical library might even play less of a part than I was expecting. But I guess we'll see when I get to some more. I'm not sure. I'll try and finish this vlog off when I finish part 5. Wow, I nearly dropped that on top of my laptop. That would have been a disaster because this is maybe even heavy enough to cause damage. Anyway, I'll update you and finish off this vlog when I finish part 5, and we'll see how much of the book that wouldn't burn I'll have got through by then. But I'd really like to try and focus on finishing this off, but we'll see. So I have finally finished Rhythm of War. This feels like a massive achievement because it took me so long, but also I will say part 5, the payoff was worth it. Oops, I just kicked you. I definitely think the first 4 parts in a lot of ways feel like a lot of setup for that last part, and it's only because that last part delivers that it really deserves the hype, in my opinion, or like that it actually feels satisfying in the end. I think if you had read all those first 4 parts and then there hadn't been all that exciting stuff in the last part, it would have been actually quite disappointing. There are still some things about the bigger setup that I feel like either I don't understand or I feel like they're kind of just being accepted as what's going to happen. I think it's a little bit like with Wheel of Time. There's this big final battle between the dragon and the other guy. Let's keep it vague in case you haven't read it. And I always felt like, why would the other guy even bother when he knows there's a good chance that he's going to lose? Or is he really that confident that he's going to win? And it's the same with this. I feel like the next book, Wind and Truth, is going to be all about this battle between the big bad and the good guys. And I feel like, why would the bad guy even bother in agreeing to what he's agreed to? Like, why not just win normally? But maybe I get it, but also things that happened in part 5 did completely change the way that that's going as well, and I kind of love it. There's a particular character, and I just keep repeating his name because I cannot believe what he's doing, and I just need to read Wind and Truth to know how much of a disaster he's going to make of things, or is he actually going to help? I don't know, but yeah, there was a lot of stuff that happened that wrapped things up nicely, but also opened so many questions about what's going to happen next in the final, or in the 5th book, which is the final book in the first half of the Stormlight Archives. He's made it very complicated, you know, very complicated to talk about. But anyway, I think I'm actually going to put aside a lot of December to read Wind and Truth now, because otherwise, like, it's kind of good because I never want to read too many new things in December, because I'm trying to make videos about like my best books of the year and what if you read the best book of the year in December. But if I start Wind and Truth near the beginning of December, I probably won't finish it till 2025 anyway. So in some ways that's good. In fact, I've just seen that Wind and Truth is the longest of the Stormlight Archive books, so maybe I even need to be putting aside like 6 weeks. Brandon, what are you doing? Anyway, the summary is that was super worth it in the end, and I am glad that I did my whole Cosmere reread, because actually Elantris, a lot of people might skip Elantris because people say it is Sanderson's first work, it's not as good, but there was an Elantris reference in there, and I knew from early on in this book that it was an Elantris reference, like I guessed it, but when it was like made very clear at the end, I was like, I really enjoyed it, like the references to Warbreaker and Elantris and some other things. Like Warbreaker and Elantris are the ones I think that were the clearest, but I think there's also some other things going on. So I can't really imagine reading the Stormlight Archives without having read the rest of the Cosmere books. I think, like, you'd be fine. You'd just every now and then be like, that's weird. Which maybe I'm still missing bits. So maybe that's fine. I definitely still feel like I could reread this series again and pick up on even more things than I have on my first read through. That's not true. I've read the first 3 books of the Stormlight Archives twice, and then this 4th book only once. But it's taken me like 2 years to do a read through of the whole Cosmere, and while part of me thinks, wouldn't it be awesome to do more rereads in the future when more books have come out and I can pick up on things that I didn't pick up on previously, like that took 2 years. I can't commit to doing this again, can I? It's the same with I really would love to read again The Realm of the Elderlings, but that also took, I think, at least a year, maybe 2. There's so many books to read. How do I also find time to reread all the books that I loved in the past? Anyway, as well, I have been continuing the audiobook of The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. I think I've still got quite a lot to go though, and it really is quite strange. I will say it is reminding me a bit of the Red Sister trilogy, or the Book of the Ancestors trilogy. The writing style seems similar in just the way that he will describe things and the way the characters act a bit. Like, definitely the main girl, Levira? Is that right? I have such a terrible memory sometimes. Anyway, she's kind of like a slightly less feral version of Nonna from Red Sister. And then she's kind of now found herself in a bit of a school situation, which is again similar to Red Sister. So there's a lot of similarities there. The other bit is a bit strange because we've got this boy locked with these other younger adults, maybe, in this library, but there's some weird sci-fi elements in there as well, because there seems to be these 2 robots. Like, they're not called robots because these people don't really have a conception of robots, but it seems like there's robots taking care of them, and there's this mechanism that is what caused them to be there. It's not really clear what this mechanism is either, but it's definitely some kind of technology. So I'm kind of enjoying like not knowing what's going on, but being like fed little bits so I can try and start to figure it out. I'm still waiting for the 2 plot lines to kind of come together more, and I'm very suspicious that there's some odd time stuff going on, which, if there is, that's something I love. So I will continue The Book That Wouldn't Burn in my next reading vlog next week, or actually it's Tuesday today, so this week. So catch up with me there if you'd like to know more about my thoughts with that one. Oh, I haven't finished my Cosmere reread yet, or my Cosmere read through yet, because I'm going to be reading The Lost Metal next month, I think. So in a couple of weeks. But anyway, let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about in this video, because I would love to chat with you about them down in the comments. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.